So I hope you enjoyed it. So just overall, Skateistan's been operating continuously in Afghanistan now for 15 years. So even with the Taliban coming into power, we've been able to continue the back to school program, and that continues to run. It does look very different, and we had to adjust a lot to make the program work. For example, the facility that you see in the movie was basically taken by the Taliban government as soon as they came into power. The one in Kabul, but we still have the ones in northern Afghanistan, Mazar Sharif, and in Bamyan. We also have operations throughout the world in 20 locations. So this is, I guess, showing where it started. I went to Afghanistan first in 2007 and lived there for 7 years through until 2014. And the organisation has been running with local staff at all of our locations since around 2015. So this is a big secret to how we were able to so effectively keep on working after the Taliban took over. There was just a lot of experience, as well as being a local NGO staffed by Afghans that had been living in a very precarious situation for so long, and this was just another step. Under the Taliban regime, we're able to have girls in our program up to the age of 12, mostly, and it all runs. It all runs very well, but there's always new challenges coming up. And especially the skateboarding element is less of a focus. It's really have a big focus on education in Afghanistan, whereas in other places it might be more, more of a mix. I'd love to take you.
I have a few suggestions. Yeah. On here, that's it on because the fire might go on. So I think it's really interesting to see the combination of the education and the skateboarding. Can you take us back a few steps on how it started, and what was your initial sort of purpose when you started the program, and how it's evolved?
Sure. So I've been a skateboarder for now 44 years. I started in 1980 and arriving in Kabul in 2007. I was looking for a job because my girlfriend at the time got a job as a researcher, and I had a background as a researcher, and skateboarding was my passion. So I brought a skateboard with me to Afghanistan and simply went out into the streets. I knew from research on Afghanistan that what was very, very important was listening to Afghans themselves about what they wanted or what was needed. And here there were children not giving me my skateboard back in the street. And I thought, well, half of the population in Afghanistan is under the age of 15. Why not listen to this? This is exactly the thing. Everybody thought that I was completely crazy. Why isn't this the last thing that children in Afghanistan need to skateboard? So I didn't go there with the idea of starting an NGO, or I hadn't actually been involved in non-profit work at all. It was really the children in the street that had found me, were excited to skateboard. And the thing that really was important to me was the fact that girls were trying to skateboard and they didn't do other sports. And I realized that this was a loophole because other sports were seen as activities for boys. So if a girl wanted to play soccer or to fly a kite or to box or to ride a bicycle, she was told, you're not allowed to do that. That's for boys, but skateboarding didn't exist. So that was I took advantage of that, and I gave the girls more time to skateboard than the boys, so they got better than the boys. And then I ran rigged competitions that the girls of course won because they practiced, they had more opportunity to skateboard. So, and it was really just the spark in the children's eyes, because that was the way that I felt when I first stepped on a skateboard when I was 5 years old, and I couldn't leave it alone. And they felt that same joy, and it's like, well, why should I hold back from what else can I do to try to build this? And so I just try to get advice from people that were running non-profits. How do you set up a non-profit? How do you? I started everything from scratch, and I literally had no money at the time. I was living on $20 a week in Kabul, running these skateboard sessions with the kids in the street, and with bombs going up around. But I was in my element.
And how did the parents respond? The parents of the girls respond?
It was really important to get certain parents involved, because they then convinced the other parents that it was okay. It was literally started with 3 or 4 girls in there was an empty fountain in a park in Makrian, which was it was a suburb that the Russians built, and they were in Kabul. And this fountain was perfect because it was an enclosed space, so I could control the skateboards not being disappearing, and also then giving the girls more time to skateboard than the boys. So the girls get 15 minutes, the boys get 5 minutes, the girls get 15 minutes again. So it was this controlled environment. And so there were 3 or 4 girls that were really keen, and by them doing it, then other girls also, you could see them week after week, they'd creep slowly closer watching what other girls were doing. And then joined, and then that was then the spark to talk to the parents. And so that was, you also saw that in the film where Fatima goes to the house, and that was essential. We needed to connect with the community. I knew that it had to be accepted by the parents, otherwise there was no chance for the girls.
No, it's interesting. I think there was one parent who said we want our children to be able to read, we want them to be educated. So how did the school happen?
That was all from those initial girls that were skateboarding in the fountain saying, we like skateboarding, but we also want to go to school, because they were street working from as young as 4 or 5 years old. And there was one girl, Fazila, who was really good at skateboarding, and her parents pulled her out of school, and I knew that she was top of her class. She was doing really well, coming from a very poor background. And then, so that's where the connection to education was made. Again, listening to Afghans, listening to what the children were interested in doing, and then following it. And then the next step was what you actually saw, which was the back to school program. So that was the combination of education and skateboarding, where I helped some kids to get back to school by becoming skateboard instructors for me. So they would get $1 per session to teach the other girls, because $1 was all that I had at the time to offer. And that was enough to encourage the parents to allow their daughter to stay in school. Then we built the facility, and we had the program sort of set up with classrooms, and we did creative arts activities and skateboarding. And then the kids were saying, we love coming to Skateistan, but we also want to go to regular school. So that's where the back to school program started. And we had an accelerated learning of years 1 to 4 with Skateistan in 1 year, and then they could go back into the 4th grade or 5th grade in regular school. But again, listening to the children, what they wanted to do.
You said listening very many times, and actually it's really interesting, because I've been saying, it's just my latest thing is we've got to learn to listen. We don't have the answers. we're going into those environments, we need to listen to what are the needs. So just so interesting, isn't it? We've been
There's a
talking-
reason you have 2 ears and only 1 mouth.
Yeah.
That's bad.
So any questions? I'm sure, yes.
To ask a question. Something sort of quite tangent, but actually very part of it. Coming from such a patriarchal society, how did, and children with this incredible sense of justice and injustice, how did those little boys react when the girls got 15 minutes and they got 5? I couldn't imagine that going by well.
They wanted to skateboard so much that they
would invite them.
they did. There were different dynamics, and there's also then a like an ethnic pecking order where
Hierarchy, yes,
Ashkenas are
yeah.
at the top and
And
and so there were different, and then also socioeconomic backgrounds. The rich kids formed a little bit of a group, and then the poorer kids were this other group. So one were called the Shining Stars, and the other one were the Dusty Warlords or something like that. But it was yeah, there were different dynamics that came out, but I guess the pull of skateboarding and doing something very new was enough. And I think one really good example is one of the best boys was he was in the streets. He was a bit of a gang leader, around 13 years old, and he was visibly high from sniffing glue, because a lot of kids repair shoes, and then the glue that they use to repair shoes is then used as a drug. And I didn't let him skate when it was clear that he was intoxicated, and he had to sit there for an hour and a half and watch all of the other kids skate. And it was like, it really worked. It was such a magnet to create some structure around it that actually broke hierarchies that existed. And that was also really important for the school, that it was a safe place for girls, and creating it as a safe, different place. It was
the
really
school was
important.
just for the girls.
No, the school. So the places that we have overall were always half girls. So we had, when I opened up in Kabul, there were 165 girls that we could attract into the program. So we had a total of 330, and there was another 200 boys in the waiting list, but I wasn't going to allow any more boys until we had more girls.
Did
So
they
we always
follow
had
the
half.
school as well?
And so we had different days for the boys and girls.
Yeah, I was going to have it that way, yeah.
Yeah, so we had.
So some of the boys also needed to have that support in terms of their education.
Absolutely, yeah. That was that's part of it. And today in Afghanistan, we've got around 1,200 participations weekly in the program. So. Sorry, I strayed a little bit from your question, but it's very important to create the space where some sort of different order is possible. And
But I think the question was about how the boys felt also,
Yeah.
seeing the girls. Did that change the dynamics between the girls and the boys? And when they could see the girls were equally good skateboarders?
it's a challenge in every country that we've operated in. In Cambodia, they told us, everybody that was running the programs for the first 6 months, that it would be impossible to get girls to be part of the program and to skateboard and to do a sport, because they just weren't interested. That's what we were told. And I said, no, don't. We have to have half girls, and that's that's how it needs
Do
to
the
be
boys
set up.
see the girls differently afterwards? Do they?
I think so.
Yes, I
It does.
would imagine.
So there is a period where there's resistance for sure. There's resistance from the parents, there's resistance from older brothers and sisters, there's resistance from the boys, there's resistance from the community, and that needs to be pushed through. And sometimes you do it effectively, and sometimes it's extremely hard. But that's an ongoing daily battle for the last 15 years.
Did you speak the language when you got there? Or it was all just body language?
I had very basic Dari, but there were many Afghans that also spoke English and then came on as volunteers, older Afghan volunteers that were able to then help. And I also tried intentionally to stay as much in the background as possible, to not to get in the way of it being seen as an activity that was appropriate in Afghanistan. It was so important that no skateboard videos were shown, no skateboard magazines were shown. I also tried not to show any skateboard tricks. I wanted them to just explore it was. I mean, for me, it was also fascinating. It was like going back to the 1950s when nobody had skateboarded before or seen a skateboard. So that's that was very important to gaining acceptance. Actually, quite a bit harder in South Africa, where we opened in 2016, where skateboarding was already established. It was mainly a male activity, and then getting the girls involved was almost harder, because there was a cultural they're all different challenges.
How did you get the skateboards in Afghanistan in 2008? You said, since it was the loophole. So how did you have a sponsorship? Did you manage to?
We got big donations of skateboarding gear from different skateboarding companies, and that was a big deal for me because it was coming from my skateboarding heroes who I didn't think I'd ever get to talk to, and all of a sudden they're giving me all sorts of gear. And then we organised postage and try to getting things over, but it always took much longer than we thought, and it was always a headache. We actually did a lot just actually physically carrying them into the country. Every time we went in and out, you come back with a lot of gear.
Did the skateboards stay at the school? Did they take them back?
No,
so
always
really
just
property. So so then there was no risk.
And the program that I started in the fountain, I had 3 skateboards at the start. That was it. That was shared between 70 children.
How many?
70. I had up to them. So it was like you go skateboard for 5 minutes.
Lots of
and
blessings
next
in
person.
there. Lots of blessings. Yeah, sharing, waiting your turn, being patient. I think Jenna wanted
I wanted to ask, how did you decide to dedicate yourself to the 50-50? Like, if we can only get 165 girls, then the total is maxed out at this number because it's double. Like that, there's a lot of systems where like, okay, well maybe if we get 30%, it's enough. Like, how did you decide it was 50 and that was it? That was the cap.
That was the actual starting point, because it was exciting for me that girls wanted to skateboard on the streets of Kabul. It wasn't that exciting for me that the boy wanted to do it. That wasn't so surprising or unusual. The fact that a girl was on a skateboard and wanting to do it, and then all of a sudden becoming a role model to other girls, that was the whole magic of what that was the eureka moment. Not anything that the boys were doing, but it was important to have the boys involved as well, because they needed to be educated that girls can also play sports and go to school, and they needed to be supporters. So that was then always has been a driving force throughout what we're doing, and today we still have 50% girls across with around about 250,000 participations in the program annually. That's just embedded in what we do, and that came from the first brave girls that stepped on a skateboard in the street against all of what was going on around them. Yeah, the programs that we're running in Afghanistan were between the ages of 5 and 17.
Yeah.
Now it's gotten younger, simply because that's what is possible. We do programs with teenage girls, and I actually didn't mention that before when we had a male member in the room from Afghanistan. I wasn't sure what backlash there could be. So they're kind of secret, and we do it. They do it together with their mothers as well, and they do a sewing class, and that sewing class is okay. And then we do other activities as well.
And that's right outside of Kabul.
That's in Kabul right now.
In Kabul, right?
And
But very much under the radar.
and
Very much under the radar.
Oh, yeah.
that is, yeah, that's quite,
Yeah.
yeah,
Officially, you can only go till 12,
yeah, that's,
and then as soon as they turn 12, they have to stay home.
they're not supposed to go to school anymore. So, yeah, that's a challenge.
Yes. Do you by chance follow the lives of the children that were in the first round of your school?
From 2008, there is actually one person from the fountain that started there, and he's actually our MEL manager. So he looks after and collects the data and the impact on the programs that we have. He's in Canada today, so managed to, yeah, he's been working for Skateistan for 15 years. So he started at age 12 as a student, and then through him we've got, then he has the contact and the, yeah, a lot through Facebook, because people are just all over the world.
What about the, I think that's a really great question.
Mhm.
What about girls? Of the girls?
It's much harder to track, keep track of the girls, especially if they don't have the ability to have an online presence, or it's hard. Telephone numbers change really fast. We do our best to keep in touch with as many as possible, but we've worked with I think over 10,000 children in Afghanistan now, and yeah, we try to keep that going. And a really important part of our impact as well is measuring having real-time data. So we have we've got an app where what's happening in the programs today is put in there, and then that's also pushed to our website. We can always see what's going on. That individualized student data is not always there. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. We're pushing towards it, but it is tricky.
Ollie, could you talk a little bit about the legacy? I know you and I have talked a lot about it, but in terms of the question around tracking girls, I know you lose touch with them, but actually what you've taught them and what they take away and for the next generation is something that really resonated with me when you talked about the fact that you touch their lives briefly often because they're married or they leave the program, but actually you've given them a taste for education for their children. And Skateistan is not just about coming to a class and enjoying some level of education. It's the cultural change that you're
Breaking the cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's definitely an element where you saw also in the movie where the parents of the girls in the program didn't go to school. So to then get their children into school is very hard because the parents simply don't prioritise education for their children, or don't think that it's too hard or maybe not necessary or not for them. So breaking that, and if we can get girls, especially 9, 10, 11 years old, or even younger in the program, even if they're with us for a couple of months, we would then hope that they think that their sons and daughters should actually go to school, and they've had a taste of what it's like to be in an educational environment, and what that can give them, and that it's actually possible. So this breaking the cycle. So it's a very long-term perspective.
One of the things I think me that came out there was seeing the joy when the skateboarding, the joy in their faces, and it's almost tangible that there is a sense of achievement and pleasure.
Also.
Yeah,
Freedom also.
it frees them. Yeah. Is that something that you noticed, that the confidence level,
These are things that we're trying to really measure as much as possible, because I see it, I feel it. I mean, when you're there, you really have a sense that this is completely changing their outlook. A really, really nice aspect of that is that the children from poorer, less educated households tend to be bigger risk takers. And that also then makes them better skateboarders, which then makes them heroes or role models in the eyes of the other kids. And what would happen is that those more educated kids would help those other kids that were their role models in the skate park in the classroom. So that was a nice dynamic.
breaking of barriers in terms of the socioeconomic.
And so that's why we also wanted to have more educated kids in the program as well, and we'd usually have a 70-30 split of 70% from a very low income background, and then a sort of more open policy for any children to come and take part in it. And that peer-to-peer learning is really important, and maybe even more than what we can impart in our programs are the relationships that could then be formed between the kids, and giving them access to
those hierarchies. Yes, exactly.
Giving them a network.
Yes.
Sorry, one more question about, so if I understand correctly, the skate park has been taken away in Kabul on the boys and the girls. So there's no more of that magic. Have you noticed an impact on their ability to concentrate, to learn, that magic is gone? It's like having school now with no recess. How has that affected the actual learning? Not to have the sport, not to have the joy, not to have the motivation that they got from skateboarding.
I mean, we're still trying to then do impromptu skateboarding in other spaces that don't have ramps and are not as exciting, and trying to do it in a way where it's like also possible to do without getting into trouble. But it's watered down. It's absolutely watered down, and I think that another something that's very interesting in terms of neuroscience research is showing how children that live under a lot of strain and pressure sometimes have resting heart rates of 130, 140 beats a minute, and this the same as rocking a baby to sleep on the ramp. If they go backwards and forwards, or just a click, 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 click going down a pavement, there's studies that show that skateboarding can actually regulate. And so there's 3 parts of the brain, and this is just this very primal one where most of these kids are in a flight or fight mode, and if you can regulate them quite well through skateboarding. The next part is the socialization factor, and then the third part is using your frontal cortex and getting to that. But it's a progressive thing. If you don't have the bottom layer of calming them down, and that's the magic.
Yeah, and that's something without those elements there.
It's watered down.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that affects the learning.
And
Charlie and Jenna.
So yeah, I just find it amazing. I just went on your Instagram. You were one guy with a skateboard, now like 67,000 people following your Instagram. And I'm just wondering whether there was a point, because a lot of the groups that we're working with they're very not known. Was there a point where suddenly it sort of took off? And what was that point, and how did you get there that everybody started hearing about your organization and being able to get funds?
It was a period between 2007 and 2010. So getting the actual Kabul skate school built was a big step forward. We were very early adopters of social media, so we were on Instagram in 2010 before a lot of other people, and I had a lot of young volunteers that were very savvy and very tapped into what's a good way of actually making connections.
It's kind of cool. It's cool doing skateboarding.
Yeah, it was.
Was the Instagram following, was that important in being able to get awareness and fundraising?
Facebook was the first. It was definitely the first one, and then it became Instagram. But it was also a lot of media articles. So we were lucky to. I mean, being in Kabul, there were a lot of news organisations that were covering the war in Afghanistan, but they weren't really going out of Kabul, and we were a massive good news story that was there, and we cleverly used media and media strategies for spreading the word, gaining interest.
What you said, I think newspaper articles, or even being on the BBC and being interviewed and so on. That's where people, but more than on Instagram. Instagram, I don't know whether you get funding from watching it being, you get awareness building. But I remember a story of my daughter. They were interviewed on BBC about their work, and it was incredible. And it wasn't even well described, because the person who was interviewed was not particularly good. It was one of the fun. Still incredible response. So I think the newspapers and television really get that word out in a way that is very powerful. It's interesting because we're into social media, but sometimes
I think effectively marketing a non-profit organisation is a very, very big key of growth, and we created a strong brand at a very early stage that people kind of got. They understood who we were, what we were doing. We continued to do things that were interesting, and then try to build on that. But that was definitely coming a little bit from my being a skateboarder, and skateboarders having video magazines in the 90s and all of these new media, so very early media adopters, and then utilizing it effectively.
And
hopefully that's not too.
I think there was a hand.
Just one of the girls said about how she'd love to compete and be able to do that. Is that a possibility for any of them? Has that been a reality for any of them? Or because they kind of have to stay a bit more under the radar with it, has it got to stay as more of just a fun game, fun activity to get them in?
We try as much as possible not to push them competitively or on this track of being as good as possible. There's always the opportunity, and the spaces are made available for, but I mean, if you're not in an environment where there's a whole lot of other people pushing each other, and to get to a certain level is very, very difficult. However, skateboarding is now in the Olympics since the last Olympics. There has to be, for it to stay an Olympic sport, there needs to be people taken part from lots of different countries around the world. And so I think that there is going to be an element, and there's going to be half the opportunities given for women as well. So this is there is a huge opportunity to use the growth of skate. There will be further growth of skateboarding, and I think that can give more and more opportunities for girls around the world as well.
I have seen a film which was tracing, I think, two sisters who were Afghani girls, sisters who were training as boxers. And they were preparing to go to the Olympics, and one of them was really, really good and made it to the team. And I think in the end she couldn't go because she wasn't given a visa. So they wouldn't allow her to leave. So all of this, well, that's the thing, you know, you are dealing with a political situation which is really quite.
And to that point, also to give opportunities to girls to go to school, and then all of a sudden those opportunities are taken away from them by the Taliban government, or they can do primary school and they want to go to secondary school and are not allowed to. There are different things that are built up, but I really believe that even 1 week or 1 day in that environment can be valuable, and we've just got to try to work and provide those opportunities for as long as possible, and just keep that thread.
And just that stat you gave on that theme of the female participation in Mazar al-Sharif is the biggest concentration of female skateboarders anywhere in the world.
Yeah, so in 2014, we opened Mazar Sharif. There was 1,500 spaces, and half of those were for girls. And so those 750 girls that are becoming part of our program weekly made it the highest concentration of female skateboarders anywhere in the world. And this is in rural Afghanistan. So skateboarding,
that's still going.
That is still going, but it's smaller now. The skateboarding also became the largest sport for girls in the country. So
it's the large.
I loved the idea, you said that quite a while back now, but you said that there was, you kept videos and even your own tricks out so that people developed their own tricks and skills. I was wondering if you noticed any kind of local vernacular, or were there other things that that we didn't think of in California?
There was, I mean, definitely the clothes that they're wearing. They would, like kids in skate parks all over the world, they've got their earphones in, but they're listening to Indian Bollywood soundtracks. So the music, the clothes, and then also the tricks. There was a lot of what we call boneless with your hand and sort of spinning it in the air, and it just doing it in their own way, in their own style. It's simply something that is fun to do, and then you've got a community around you, and that community growing was really special because it crossed ethnic boundaries. When one of our instructors sadly was killed in a suicide attack, there were other family members and other people that are part of our program that were from different ethnicities at the funeral, at the burial, and this just doesn't happen in Afghanistan. It was clear that this was a new.
To break the barriers down.
It was there was
Finding peace through skateboarding.
a new community had formed around this shared activity, and that is something that has incredible and it doesn't have to be skateboarding, it could be any shared activity, and the new communities that can pop up around that and how powerful they can be and how different they can be and how different they can think around a new shared activity is powerful.
How many countries are you in?
We have 20 locations, 12. The countries that we're active in at the moment are Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, South Africa, Kenya, Bolivia, Jordan, and there's programs in with refugees in Belgium and in Sweden, and there were in Albania. I might be missing some.
And does the educational park come into those programs?
Depending on
because there's not the same need for
depending on the capacity of those different projects
and also the
programs
context
and the context. What is important in that environment, giving unrestricted support to those groups, helping them to also measure their impact, and then us also talking about a collective impact of it overall, but really giving them freedom in those communities to do the things that really make sense to them.
I love the impact, but I'm also a researcher at heart, and I love the spark of this thing where it's like at the core, it's just because you had your skateboard and you realize you listened to the people and the kids and you realize that they loved it, right? And so the researcher in me is going like, when the Olympics comes in, there'll become sort of an international language of skateboarding, right? Which might be dominated by the Western voice because it's the sort of the where it came from. It feels so charming and beautiful. This like almost dialect of the language of skateboarding that grew up. It feels like there's this moment where right now that dialect exists, but it might actually disappear because of the international exposure will dominate.
Unless
Do they have exposure?
Well, but the Olympics would
will have parameters,
yeah.
but unless they really are true to the Olympic spirit and actually say, well, what are they doing in Afghanistan? Okay, what can we include in the program? But you know, that's too.
Yeah. No, but I love the idea. I love the idea of this like this moment of this moment of local voice, like somehow to capture, like, or maybe there's skate mags that are showing that the local culture. I don't know. It's just it feels very, very important to capture that right now.
I think there's enormous potential globally to seize this moment, because there are sparks of it in so many different countries with female-led programs, with girls that are skateboarding in so many different countries, and their expression of it. Looking on the last Olympic Games, there was a very big difference between the women skateboarding and the men. The men were the women were supporting each other so much more, and you could just visibly see how they were cheering each other on, and they kind of were less interested in the competitive aspect of it, and so that can also be built on from an international perspective as well in terms of being inclusive. Thanks.
I have a question. I mean, the roots are in Afghanistan, so the challenges were surmountable, even though, as you said, you didn't set out trying to set up an NGO. But now that you've grown globally, what are some other challenges that have surprised you in other countries, or where you've been blocked, or is Afghanistan remaining the ultimate challenge that you've basically pierced through?
Yeah, Afghanistan has the highest impact simply because of it being the worst place to be born a girl around the world, and then our focus on girls programming, and then the impact that programming can have. Yet the challenges of running NGOs in all different countries. They all have their different. I mean, in Cambodia, for example, there could all of a sudden there has been definitely a big backlash against human rights organisations and environmental organisations, and we've been able to somehow under Hun Sen skirt around that a little bit, but it's not necessarily the easiest place to operate as a non-profit because of that governmental. So I could imagine trying to operate really large scale in Russia or China would be probably also really difficult.
Not easy. And in Lebanon, what's the community you work with? Which community?
It's called Just Childhood, and it's kindergarten, and then also a little bit older. And there's Syrian refugees that are in the area that can't access the regular school system because they're not registered in. And so our informal skateboarding education classes
So
the
refugee community.
Refugee community. That's the program. It's the program there.
Do you ever run into people, kids that are forced to, like, they're forced by their parents to go to school, and so they're like, I don't want to go skateboarding. I don't know. It's just like, because you can imagine if the parents are motivated enough to get them into school, like in a situation like that, right? Like go to school, then there'd be kids that are sort of that don't want to do the skateboarding part or this not the thing.
It's what we always try to have a really wide range of activities available to the kids, because not every kid wants to actually skateboard. Some kids are very interested in. We've got a climbing wall in the school. We have a basketball court. We have table tennis tables. We have video cameras. So some got really into making movies or acting in the sort of creative arts style classes. So, well, skateboarding was like this first hook of play-based activity, and also learning through play is something that is extremely effective. So different types of play, but it has to resonate with the children, and it needs to be a safe space. And then through those shared things, it's a very different space than going to regular school in Afghanistan, where the kids are probably beaten daily if they don't do their lessons. They're wrapped over the knuckles with a ruler, or I mean, they're literally abused in class. So I could imagine how it would be less exciting to go to regular school and then come to Skateistan, which is a safe place where they've got trusted adults that they know are not going to hurt them
And respect the children.
and respect them. But the regular system is also something that's very, very important to also integrate them in, so that there are other things that they can hang on to and build on, and we're a supporting mechanism.
And what's the plan? What's the next step? More countries, more things in the same countries, more kids, more what's the
We right now in 2018 we started a knowledge sharing network, and that was to basically help all of these other non-profits based around skateboarding that have popped up inspired by Skateistan, and we want them to be as successful as possible. So we started to just openly share everything that we knew. And so we created a platform called the Good Push Alliance, and we run webinars and have e-learning courses and all of these assets to help them with curriculum, help them with data collection, help them with fundraising, help them with their finance set up, or getting land, or a legal setup, or anything that they need. Then the next step is we've grown that out to 834 projects in over 100 countries. So this Good Push Alliance, all of these different projects are part of this network. And so we want to start to also give them small grants, because a lot of these are grassroots based organizations. $5,000 or $10,000 can make a huge difference to these tiny tiny organizations, and we've got the ability to also guide them through it. And they can take, there's a lot of resources, and there's 15 years of us making mistakes that they can hopefully avoid. So,
Such interesting model
Mhm.
for replication. That is, I mean, this should be written up as a great model, because one of the favorite buzzwords in philanthropic field is, well, are you replicable? Are you, how can this grow? How can you, what's your reach, and so on. But that's such an interesting model where you're setting up a platform for existing projects to be able to really fully grow from your learning from as was fascinating.
And I was just thinking as we were talking about this, I'm like, and we're recording you, and I'm thinking we have to share this with all of our project project circle members and project owners as well, just because the way you intuitively, from how you started everything and the process that you've done is something that we see that when we're working with our projects, these areas that
it's that generosity to not be territorial and say, I created this, I don't want anybody else, but to say, look, I've learned all this, let me share it with you. And that's what we should be seeing more of in there.
I just want to show that everybody's saying bravo online. They're all kind of leaving now, but they all, I mean, we had about 8 or 10 people online, but they all stayed and they're leaving now, but but they were very, very, very taken with everything. I mean, with the film and obviously the interview
panel around this.
Yeah.
Very interesting. No,
I mean, flexibility is another part of what a big part of this focus now for what the next steps are comes also in reaction to the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan, trying to understand what is next. Me having at one point 100 staff, and if we want to have 10 times the impact, I don't want to have 1,000 staff. How can all of these other projects also, I want to have as much impact as possible. I want to change as many lives as possible. We don't have to do it all ourselves either.
That's the thing. That's recognizing that we don't have to do it all ourselves. Other people can do it, and it's just as good.
But I was able to get support from the Norwegian ambassador at that point in time in 2009 in Kabul. There are so many other people that could also really need that leg out and support, but don't necessarily know how to find it or get it. And this is where we can step in and say, hey, we've done it. We know that it works. And these are the types of people that we need to invest in and help grow.
So what do you need to make this next step to grow?
The next step for us is we're trying to put together 10 supporters at the basically right now our budget is around 2.4 million a year, and we're trying to find 10 partners so that we've got each taking about 10% of the budget, so around 200 to 300,000 per year, so that we're not and then having that multi-year. So we had Nike come on at $1 million over 4 years just recently, and we're looking to get others. Then it's really whatever unrestricted support we can get, and that we can then be flexible in terms of putting the money exactly where it needs to be. That is then also part of it. So we're really trying to keep the bureaucracy down to a minimum. We're trying to have impact data that everybody can see very clearly and can get without us having to create reports and do costly M&E, but it's sort of embedded. And so that's the support that we get is we 1/3 from individuals, 1/3 from foundations and corporate, and then 1/3 from government. That's what we're trying to have overall. So it's very, very diversified, but then it's also a lot of work and a lot of different models in terms of doing the fundraising as well. But I'm in Geneva tomorrow all day, and I'd be really excited to meet with anybody and discuss further, or if there's ideas of
Are you meeting with any people specifically? Have you got?
I don't have things. I've only got a lunchtime meeting at this point. So if there are is anybody that's interested in following up, or
You have had a couple of interesting meetings today.
yes, there were some.
We had some good meetings today.
There was that with I met with Huda.
Huda,
That was
yeah.
that was very positive.
She's a giving woman as well.
Yes.
Okay.
She's a member of our community.
And yeah, there was also a very very positive meeting with Gift Foundation. So also part of the board.
Do you have a policy on certain restrictions of funds that you will or won't take? For example, the WHO has limitations against accepting or having anything to do with tobacco. Yeah, as just one example. Do you have things that you won't do, or things that you or spaces of the world that you wouldn't accept money from?
I mean, overall, we definitely didn't want to. We haven't had support from soft drink companies or fast food companies. That was quite, and Red Bull is a very big player in the extreme sports, and that was. And overall, we really tried very, very hard to keep our carbon footprint as low as possible. So we're also aware of things that are associated from that angle, but I have a $750,000 gap this year and a $1.5 million gap next year, and
It's very difficult. And I hear you. I think though you're working with children, so of course tobacco companies. When you're working with children, I think you can't take money from tobacco. You can't take money from, specifically when you're working with young people and with alcohol. I was on the board of the international school, and we had big discussions about, because we had many students coming from the tobacco companies at hand, and but people want to take money. I said, you know, there was a group of us who said, as a school, we cannot be seen to be taking money from tobacco companies, which are, you know, so there's that. I think that because it's working with young people,
Yeah.
On the
But
other
actually,
hand,
my specific question was the tobacco is because all of these reasons, right? But my specific, and maybe this is actually relevant to you as an Australian. My specific question is actually around extractive industries, because I run across there's a lot of NGOs that there's issues around the extractive industries space.
and the big foundations that are getting a lot of money from those.
We haven't
industries.
directly got support from any extractive industries so far.
You haven't,
No, but
but you
Do you
could. I
have
mean, there's some really great.
I'm asking this for a very
foundations.
specific reason. I'm sorry. But
Yeah, there are great foundations in Geneva that are coming out of the extractive Trafigura, or Sadax, Puma. They give a lot of money.
is it a? Do you,
I would take the meeting.
It would. Yeah. Good.
But I think it's really smart that you're very data focused. Because if you start to get, you know, a lot of people who want to put some money into your organization, we need to be able to show them the impact, right? When you start looking at organizations and corporations, in their, you know, annual reports, they have to show what they're doing, and then they have to show where the money went and what was the impact. So if you go along that line and you share that with those other 800 or whatever companies or organizations, that's a very good thing for the future, because anybody who's doing anything to do with sustainability or anything to do with,
They need to learn that.
they need to have it, because when they give you the money, it's almost like, and you're gonna show me the impact.
It's transactional.
Right, it's, you know, and that's what they have to report on, because it's a nice feeling, but you need to show something for it. right?
But I think
So
now
it's
data
great.
collection is also very different. And I think with all the you know, the way that the data can be analyzed much, it's not as time consuming and expensive.
Yeah,
as it
I think
was.
if you build it in like he's doing now, right, we're having it all the time so that you don't have to go back and try to do
No,
something.
but building it in using technology
Yeah,
is even better. Because you can kick out all sorts of data, which is much harder when you're doing it.
yeah, for me, I guess I only think with technology,
Learning is a bit better, yeah, but you
Yeah.
know, if you're in countries where there's not, you have to.
could be. Yes, it's true. Yeah, I there's one thing about that film that really hit me was all those people, all those young girls with those dreams. And you know what's happened to that country, and you think what's happened to them. It's crushing, right? It's crushing.
It's crushing.
It's going backwards. It's unbelievable. Those girls in 2017, right? Is that when that film?
It was 2018 probably filmed.
Right, so that's like literally, you know, they
You
were
know,
on up ski.
It was so interesting because we did just after the Taliban came in, we did a panel and we got various people to speak about, you know, what is going to happen to girls. And it was like so depressing. It was heartbreaking, depressing, you know, where's the hope? And we had on the panel a wonderful Zura who has a program here in, which is based in Geneva, but her programs are in a lot in Kabul and also, you know, around education and health. And I said, you know, how do you keep going? You know, what is keeping you at it? And she said to me, you know, Atalanti, we have a generation of educated girls. They haven't forgotten what they learned, and they will still fight because they know what it was. But you know, then you think, okay, those girls are not gone out. You know, how many are still there? So it's like heartbreaking.
But I think whatever you can do when you've got the opportunity to do it is really important to do. And I'm so glad that we made some hay while the sun was shining.
Absolutely.
And it's
there, it's not lost.
there. And so you were saying to that point about what Zora said, there is a fire that is ignited and it can keep on burning. Our country manager for Afghanistan is just such a powerful woman who she's dedicated. She will be there in 10 years' time, continuing to push for every opportunity for girls in the country, because she had to also overcome so many challenges and obstacles just to access her education and to get to where she got to. She was the first female marathon runner in Afghanistan, and then the first Afghan ultra marathon runner. She entered the race in the Gobi Desert, and there are not other male or female ultra marathon runners. So she runs our Afghanistan program, and she's unstoppable. So it's when the spark is there, I think it can keep on going. It lives. No matter what.
And the other thing, it's so important. Again, I was somewhere, I don't know, some conference, whatever, and there was a young, I think it was a UNICEF event, and they said, "But what can we do? You know, like we're helpless here. What can we do? Just keep talking about it. Don't let people forget what we're going through and what exists." And I think that's so important that we keep Afghanistan out there, because like Ukraine happened, and like we have to keep talking about things.
It's normalizing it as well. You see the girls that are in those classrooms, and they're just like all of our girls. They're squabbling over trainers that someone's making their trainers, and it's normal behaviour, and I think that's so important to see, because it makes them one of us. It gives them a tangibility. And the other really important thing for me was the kind of word that I used, powerful, courage.
Yeah.
They need to be praised.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.